So British Columbia has 5 conditions that we have set for any heavy oil pipeline through British Columbia. Today marks the meeting of only one of those conditions, and that is successful achievement of a certificate under the federal environmental approval process. There is still much work to be done if a Northern Gateway pipeline is ever to be built in British Columbia. Well, first of all, there are, of course, the conditions set by the Joint Review Panel that the federal government has now endorsed. In addition to that, the commitments that Enbridge made, that Northern Gateway made in their submissions to the panel now become conditions as well. Those number in and around 400. But for us in British Columbia, it is those 4 remaining conditions. We need to see world-leading spill capability for response and remediation on land. We need to see world-leading marine spill response. We need to see appropriate relationships and opportunities provided for First Nations, and we need to see British Columbia getting its fair share since we are taking so much of the risk. Well, if we think back to the initial announcement of the 5 conditions, at the time there weren't very many people who were taking those 5 conditions seriously. As time has gone on, we've seen the Alberta government come on side and sign on to an agreement to support our 5 conditions. We continue to work with them at the staff level. We've also seen the federal government through their Joint Review Panel process and through initiatives of the federal government on land spills and marine spills, taking our 5 conditions seriously as well. I also note that in their decision today, the federal government also highlights the fact that there are important permitting decisions that are properly the jurisdiction of the provinces, Alberta and British Columbia. There are federal permits as well. So I think important to see that the federal government is acknowledging not just our 5 conditions, but the important role we play in evaluating permits. Well, the concerns that they have expressed are the very same concerns that we expressed in our submission to the Joint Review Panel, where we advised the federal government through the Joint Review Panel that we did not support the Northern Gateway pipeline as it's proposed, recognizing that there are still outstanding and significantly outstanding environmental risks and concerns that we don't think yet have been proposed to be mitigated by Enbridge. We see, of course, the distinct opposition of First Nations, the concerns that they express, and that remains one of our conditions that has yet to be met by the Northern Gateway pipeline. One of the pieces of work that has been undertaken by the provincial government in our land-based spills intentions paper on policy is to develop that on land. We are continuing to work with the federal government to develop that on the marine environment. But we know that there is no one jurisdiction in the world right now that can boast world leading in every aspect. We intend to be that jurisdiction if this is ever going to happen on British Columbia's coast. What we have said in our 4th condition is that this needs to go beyond just the bare minimum legal obligations. We've said not only do the company, the proponents, the government have to meet their obligations legally for consultation, but they also have to offer to First Nations a reasonable opportunity to participate in the benefits of those projects. So it goes beyond just their bare legal obligations. Well, there's a backgrounder that Natural Resources Canada has put out. It outlines technically what next steps are. I can look ahead to continued work that we are doing with our Deputy Ministers Committee with Alberta. There will be continued work between our governments and the federal government on land-based spill response and continued work on marine-based spill response. In terms of work with First Nations, we of course want to see that advance. But it is, I think, likely to be more so on the federal end now that we see the AFIRD report out and the federal government's response to that. Again, I want to acknowledge that from the federal standpoint, with their moves on the AFIRD report, with the positive efforts they've put in on land spills and the recent report on marine spills, we've certainly seen them make tremendous progress compared to where they were even a year before. When it comes to the permitting jurisdiction that we have, that is something that belongs to British Columbia and, again, is acknowledged in this announcement today by the federal government. British Columbia has made a strong and consistent stand on the Northern Gateway Pipeline. Our position is no. We submitted our position to the Joint Review Panel. That position was no. There are conditions that need to be met. If that position is going to be changed today, one condition has been met. Our position remains unchanged. There isn't a hard time frame from the standpoint of when decisions will be made. There are some time frames that are laid out with the NRCan report and backgrounder that can give you some information as to when there are anticipated deadlines for Enbridge in their proposed construction schedule. But there are no timelines for us in terms of when decisions would be made. It would all depend on when applications are made.